It rained the day they buried my father. Not a soft drizzle, the sky cracked open as if the heavens themselves were mourning. Umbrellas bloomed like black flowers across the cemetery, but I didn't hold one. I let the rain soak into my hair, my coat, my bones. Grief felt cleaner that way. Real, undeniable, not like the forced condolences and stiff handshakes that followed. His name was Hana Park, founder of Park & Sons International, beloved philanthropist, and my father. To the world, he was a titan. To me, he was just Appa, quiet, wise, a man who never once raised his voice, even when the world gave him reason to. He used to read me bedtime stories in Latin, told me that truth and strategy were the same thing, just spoken in different dialects. He taught me the weight of silence and how sometimes not reacting is the loudest answer. I was his only child, his shadow, his legacy. So imagine my confusion, my devastation, when the will was read and my name was nowhere on it. Park & Sons will be passed to his brother, Mr. Seokjin Park, the lawyer had said, lips tight, voice rehearsed, eyes not meeting mine. My uncle, a man my father hadn't spoken to in over a decade. A man who now stood at the edge of the grave, fake tears glistening under his designer glasses, as if grief could be bought from the same place he bought his suits. Something was wrong. The house I grew up in, the one with creaky floorboards and the old swing set in the garden, was locked when I returned, my access cards revoked, my bank account frozen, my father's paintings and journals gone. They called it a legal clarification of inheritance. I called it what it was, theft. And no one questioned it. Not the board members who toasted Seokjin's leadership with champagne. Not the lawyers who once called me Miss Park with deference and now acted like I was a stranger. Not even my so-called friends who stopped returning my calls the moment the headlines changed from heiress to empire to disinherited daughter. But I wasn't angry. Not yet, because anger is loud. Anger burns too quickly. I chose something colder. I let grief calcify into resolve. I let silence become steel. I changed my name, burned old photos, sold the designer coats and jewelry, moved to a part of Seoul where no one knew the girl who used to walk red carpets in silk. I became Han Kim, plain, quiet, invisible. For 2 years I planned. I learned accounting, corporate espionage, human psychology. I memorized every department head at Park & Sons, studied their routines, their weaknesses, their sins. I used burner phones, fake identities, VPNs, and digital honey traps to uncover things that would make even the most powerful board members tremble. I watched from the outside as Seokjin turned my father's company into something hollow. The philanthropic initiatives dried up, layoffs, embezzlement, rumors of offshore dealings. He was bleeding the company from the inside, and nobody stopped him. Because nobody could. Until me. And then one rainy morning, not unlike the one that stole my father, I walked through the front doors of Park & Sons. As a new intern, nobody looked twice. They didn't see Hana Park. They saw Ha-eun Kim, fresh out of university, eager to work, perfectly average. Her resume was clean, her background check, manufactured, her smile forgettable. Just another ghost in a gray cubicle. But I wasn't here to build a career. I was here to burn an empire. From the inside, and this time, no one would see me coming. Not even him. The first thing they give you as an intern at Park & Sons isn't a tour or a welcome packet. It's a lanyard, a thin strip of nylon with your ID attached, name, photo, and barcode. The moment it clicks around your neck, you don't belong to yourself anymore. You belong to the building. And in a place like Park & Sons, the building never forgets who's walking its halls. My first day, I was one of 15 new interns shuffled into a windowless conference room where orientation was compressed into 30 minutes and a stack of non-disclosure agreements. A HR representative with a forced smile told us to dream big, but her eyes were begging us not to cause problems. We were dispersed quickly after that. No small talk, no camaraderie, just wolves tossed into the forest to see who survived. My assigned department was finance, floor 17. The air was colder there, more clinical. A landscape of muted grays, hushed typing, and people who'd stopped dreaming long ago. My supervisor was Mr. Kang, a man with permanent eye bags and a deep love for his noise-canceling headphones. He didn't bother learning names. Ha-un, right? Good. Sit anywhere. Don't bother me unless the building's on fire. Perfect. My cubicle faced a glass wall that overlooked the city. Interns saw it as inspiration. I saw it as cover. Because I wasn't here to rise, I was here to dig. By day, I did everything expected of me. I color-coded spreadsheets, printed reports, fetched overpriced coffee, and smiled when spoken to. But by night, I became someone else entirely. The internal network had vulnerabilities, back doors I found within the first week. I mapped out employee access patterns, flagged anomalies in financial statements, and cataloged every suspicious internal memo. I kept 2 laptops hidden under the floorboard of my rented flat, one for normal activity, one encrypted with every piece of data I scraped from Park & Sons. My first lead came through pattern analysis. Miss Yoon, head of procurement, logged into the system at exactly 7:52 a.m. every morning. No variation, not even on days she was traveling. That kind of consistency didn't happen naturally, and I traced her access history. It overlapped with a second login, one that didn't belong to her. A ghost account, one that matched the original credentials of Seokjin Park. My uncle, the man who was supposedly no longer on the executive chain. And yet, his ghost account had level 3 clearance. He was still watching, still operating. One night, I stayed late under the guise of a department audit. The office dimmed after 7 p.m. and most employees had left. At exactly 8:04 p.m., Ms. Yoon's terminal flickered. A remote login initiated. I intercepted the packet stream and rerouted it to my private mirror server. And what I saw made my blood run cold. A directory titled Orchid. Inside were dozens of subfolders: Orchid 1, Jakarta; Orchid 2, Busan; Orchid 3, Geneva; Orchid 4, Accra. Each folder detailed financial discrepancies, falsified employee IDs, forged vendor partnerships, and even shipping manifests for equipment that didn't exist. It was more than embezzlement. It was a global shell operation, laundered money, fake workers, fabricated assets. Park & Sons had become a front. And the worst part? Some of the oldest files in the Orchid archive dated back to when my father was still alive. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence said otherwise. Either my father had known and said nothing, or he'd been betrayed from within before he ever fell ill. I needed help. Not from a friend. I had none left. I needed someone who lived in code the way I did, someone on the inside. That's when I noticed him. Jisoo Min, IT specialist, always hunched over 2 monitors, headphones perpetually dangling around his neck. He had a jittery kind of energy, like someone who drank coffee faster than his mouth could sip. But his code? Immaculate. We crossed paths on my 4th late night. He caught me in the break room, hovering by the microwave with a cup of untouched ramen. "You're either overworking yourself to look good," he said, "or you're doing something you don't want anyone to see." I said nothing. He grinned. "Don't worry, I like secrets." I froze. He sipped his latte. "You're not just an intern, are you?" I narrowed my eyes. "And you're not just IT." Pause. Then he chuckled. "Touché." From that night, an unspoken pact formed between us. I didn't trust him, but I needed someone who could watch my blind spots. He didn't ask many questions, and I didn't offer answers. That was the arrangement. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. I was sitting on a powder keg. Park & Sons wasn't just corrupt, it was wired to implode. And if I played my next move right, I could light the match. But even as I advanced across the board, I couldn't shake the feeling. Someone was watching me back. It started with a flicker. On the 23rd floor, tucked in the corner of a restricted IT control room, the mainframe screen pulsed, just once, like a heartbeat skipping a note. Most would have missed it, but Jisoo Min didn't. I found the signal buried inside a permissions audit script he had smuggled out for me. A digital ghost calling from inside the walls of Park & Sons. Someone else was monitoring the same Orchid files. Someone with deeper access than even Seokjin's ghost account. Jisoo sat beside me in the cramped basement of an internet cafe in Hongdae, his fingers moving like fire over the keys. They're cloaked behind a rotating proxy net, military-grade obfuscation, not standard corporate defense. My mouth was dry. Then who? He paused. Could be a government flag, could be a foreign investor, could be a rogue AI script mimicking executive behavior. But if I had to guess? He leaned closer, eyes narrowed. There's a second Sokjin. The implications hit me like glass in the throat. Duplicate credentials, I asked. Not just that, he said. There's another layer of control. Whoever it is, they're 2 steps ahead of us. They're accessing Orchid, but not deleting anything. They're curating it. For who? And why? The next day, I arrived early, earlier than usual. I stood in the parking garage, engine off, and watched employees come in. Ms. Yoon, Mr. Kang, even the janitors. Everyone looked the same, but I couldn't trust it anymore. Inside the building, I passed the lobby security with my fake ID badge, nodded to the receptionist, and took the elevator alone. On floor 17, the office lights were still dim, humming awake. And yet, my terminal was already active. My monitor, my keyboard, my workspace. Someone had been there before me. There were no footprints, no notes, just a subtle shift in mouse position, a barely misaligned notepad, an open tab in incognito mode closed quickly, but not fast enough. It was a message, a single folder placed neatly on the desktop. Do you trust him? I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I pulled the power cable. Later that night, in my apartment, I isolated the drive in a sandboxed virtual machine and clicked it open. Inside, screenshots, surveillance stills, videos, all of Jisoo Min. In the break room, at his desk, at the cafe with me, the timestamps matched our private meetings. But there was more. A video file. It showed Jisoo speaking into a phone. The audio was grainy, distorted, but one word came through clearly. Seokjin. My blood froze. I watched it again. Then again. I didn't want to believe it. But part of me had known all along. Trust was too expensive in a game like this, and I had gotten it at a discount. The next time I saw him, I didn't let on. We met in the usual spot behind the vending machines. His hoodie was up, his eyes shadowed. Did you find anything? He asked casually, sipping from a convenience store coffee. I nodded. Orchid has more levels than we thought. I think they're moving assets offshore again. He grinned. Knew it. I'll dig tonight. Thing. Then left. That night I planted a bug in his system. Not to spy, to confirm, to confront. Within hours I had my answer. Jisoo's terminal accessed Orchid Level 4 through a relay tied to a company I didn't recognize. Daejin Analytics. A shell, based in Macau, traced back to an investment fund controlled by none other than Hana Park. He had been feeding my moves, watching through Jisoo, letting me get close, but only close enough to dig for him. So I did what I had to. I sent Jisoo an email at 3:41 a.m. Subject, I know. He replied 6 minutes later. Subject, then let's talk. Just you and me, no lies. He wanted to meet in person, no phones, no laptops, just us. He chose the rooftop of the abandoned Hanseo Logistics building across the river, neutral ground, open air. A perfect place for the truth, or a perfect place to bury it. Either way, I was done being a pawn. Tomorrow I'd meet him, and I'd decide if I was ready to become something else. A queen, or a killer. Part 4, the rooftop game expanded. The rooftop had always been my place to think. Not because it was quiet, it rarely was, but because it felt detached from everything below. The sirens, the egos, the whispers of Orchid's poisoned ambition. From up here, they all looked like distant noise, like chess pieces moved by a hand that couldn't feel them. I stood at the edge, wind teasing my coat, watching the city blink like it was trying to stay awake. Behind me, the door clicked open. I didn't turn. You know, Jisoo said carefully, when someone says, meet me on the rooftop, it usually doesn't end with hugs and ice cream. I glanced sideways. Then I guess we'll have to disappoint the rooftop cliché committee. He walked over, slower than usual, like he was afraid I might vanish. Or jump. So, he asked, was the dramatic summons really necessary? Yes, I said, because what I'm about to ask you could ruin both of us. That wiped the smirk off his face. Jisoo leaned against the railing beside me, his breath fogging in the early evening cold. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Below us, Orchid's tower glowed sterile and perfect, like a tomb with Wi-Fi. "I know what Seokjin is doing," I said finally. "No, I guessed before, now I know." I pulled a folded document from my coat and handed it to him. He scanned it without comment, but his jaw tightened. "You got this from the server room?" "I had help," I said. Jisoo let out a breath. "This isn't just insider trading. This is calculated demolition." "He's not trying to preserve Orchid," I said. "He's gutting it, turning it into a shell for international laundering, siphoning every ounce of legitimacy left in Park & Sons. And then he leaves, or lets it burn. Doesn't matter. Either way, he wins." He looked at me. "You want to stop him?" I nodded. "And what happens when we do?" His tone darkened. "You get the company back? Sit on the throne you were born for?" "I don't want the throne," I said. "I want justice." Jisoo laughed bitterly. "No one wants justice, Hana. They want revenge dressed in a nicer suit." He wasn't wrong. I looked down at the streets below. He killed my father, maybe not with his hands, but with his choices, his silence, his greed. He let him die and then fed on the corpse. Silence fell again. When Jisoo spoke, his voice was soft. "And you think I can help you fix it? I think you're the only one left inside who still listens to his conscience." "That's a dangerous assumption," he said. "It's all I have." He was quiet for a long time, then turned to face me fully. "I can give you access," he said. "Not to everything, but enough to plant what you need, enough to move the right pieces." I nodded. "Then let's play." But just as he turned to leave, he paused. "One thing, Hana." I turned to him. "If I do this," he said, "we stop being allies and start being co-conspirators. And Orchid doesn't forgive traitors. Are you sure you're ready for what comes next?" I looked him dead in the eye. I stopped being afraid the day he erased my name from the will. He nodded slowly. "Then we start tomorrow." Before he could open the door, I asked, "Jisoo, why are you helping me? Really?" He turned back, and for the first time, there was no sarcasm in his voice. "Because I believed in your father," he said, "and because Seokjin once told me no one could ever control you." He smiled faintly. I'd like to see him proven wrong. And then he was gone. I stayed on the rooftop for a while, letting the wind sting my face, letting that word co-conspirator settle into my bones like cold. Because now, it wasn't just about me anymore. Now it was war. The morning after the rooftop, I disappeared. Not forever, just long enough to breathe without the weight of 100 surveillance protocols on my shoulders. I checked into a nameless capsule hotel near Yongsan Station. Cash only, no ID, no questions. The kind of place where the walls were so thin they forgot your name before you even whispered it. I climbed into the capsule and let it seal around me like a synthetic cocoon. No natural light, no real air, just the soft electronic hum of artificial stillness. It was the kind of silence that either made you unravel or sharpened your blade. I chose the latter. The flash drive felt heavier in my pocket, like it knew what it contained was more than information. It was leverage. I hadn't plugged it in since I pulled it from Orchid's server room. Not because I feared what was on it, but because I feared what I'd do once I saw. After 2 hours of staring, I gave in. The folder structure opened with a dull mechanical click. No passwords, no firewalls. It was all there, waiting for me. Every detail of Seokjin's empire. Bank transfers disguised as offshore consulting payments. Bribery threads in 4 languages. Whistleblower reports marked neutralized. Conversations secretly transcribed from boardroom bugs I never knew existed. Financial matrices coded to manipulate stock values based on upcoming leaks orchestrated by insiders. But one folder was different. Titled only, Merge Procedure Final. It was a blueprint, not of growth, but of surgical destruction. Seokjin didn't want to run Park & Sons. He wanted to dissolve it, inject its name into a global shell corporation of shadow investors, and walk away with his hands clean and his bank accounts godlike. It would be fast, devastating, and virtually irreversible. No legacy, no family honor, just profit. And through all the thousands of documents, hours of audio, layers of schemes, I found no mention of me. Not one. Not even a redacted line, a footnote, a file tag. I wasn't a threat. I wasn't even an afterthought. I was dust. And that, ironically, was the only mistake he made. I spent the rest of the day building out the map, drawing digital veins of his empire, which board members were loyal by blackmail, which ones by inheritance, and which ones by fear. I mapped which subsidiaries could become liabilities, who he called, who he didn't. By nightfall, I had a war table sprawled across my screen. Phase 1, leak carefully curated parts of the Orchid documents. Nothing too nuclear, just enough to raise suspicions and destabilize internal trust. The illusion of a breach, the echo of a mole. I had already created the account months ago. It was time to make it breathe. Phase 2, document Sokjin's violations of fiduciary duty, covertly deliver them to key board members through dead-drop email accounts. Enough to make them nervous. Nervous people talk. Nervous people make mistakes. Phase 3, observe. Panic is loud, fear is sloppy, and power once questioned is harder to restore than shattered glass. But I needed something more. Someone. I thought of Jisoo. I thought of reaching out again. But what I needed now was someone with no loyalties left. I remembered her name from a conversation years ago. My father used to speak of her with both admiration and caution. She was the kind of woman who exposed monsters, then vanished before they could grow fangs. Cha Eun-mi, former investigative journalist, now whispered about in cyber forums like a digital ghost. And I tracked her to the back room of a failing bookstore in Gwanak-gu. She was hunched over a cracked laptop, the smell of old paper and stale coffee clinging to her like armor. She didn't flinch when I entered. "You're late," she said, still typing. "You didn't know I was coming," I replied. She looked up then. Her face was older than I remembered from old TV segments, but her eyes were sharp enough to slice. "You're Hana Park." "I was," I said, placing the flash drive on her desk. She didn't touch it. "I don't do sentimental revenge jobs," she warned. "This isn't about revenge," I lied. "It's about exposure." She snorted. "You think there's a difference?" I didn't answer. She tapped the drive with one finger. "This gets people killed." "I'm already dead to them," I said. That seemed to convince her more than anything else. She slid the drive into her laptop. The room went quiet for a long time. "Then how many copies did you make?" 3, I said. 2 offline, 1 prep for scheduled release. She nodded. "You're not stupid. Good. We won't survive this clean." "Then let's make it loud." We worked through the night. Eun-mi knew the kind of back doors only someone who'd been burned could recognize. She had contacts, journalists, regulators, exiled bankers. She didn't use names, just code names and signal chains. "In this world," she said once, "truth is like a knife. You pull it out too fast, it cuts you." The next morning at exactly 8:45 a.m., we pulled the blade. The leak hit select inboxes, anonymous, encrypted, and quietly catastrophic. The first ping back came from a government watchdog site that logged financial irregularities. The second came from a journalist at Chosun Ilbo. Then, an independent blog published a redacted table with the caption, "How long before this collapses?" I expected Sokjin to call. I expected Orchid's legal team. Instead, I got someone else. A private number, Seoul area code. I hesitated before answering. Then I heard her voice. "Hana?" My mother. Her voice cracked like old porcelain. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly a year. She sounded older, smaller, afraid. "What have you done?" she asked, barely above a whisper. And it wasn't the tone of someone concerned for legal consequences. It was the tone of someone who knew exactly what I had set in motion and what it could cost. For the first time in months, I forgot how to breathe. My mother's voice, cracked, hushed, and trembling, echoed in the capsule like a ghost rising from the floor. I hadn't heard it since the funeral, not even when I disappeared, not even when my name was erased from the company records. Now she was calling me, and she sounded terrified. "Hana," she repeated, What have you done? I wanted to ask her what she meant. I wanted to scream at her for her silence, for her absence, for the way she had folded into herself when Sokjin carved up my father's legacy like meat at a negotiation table. But something in her voice held me back. It wasn't accusation. It was warning. Did you see the release? I asked carefully, leaning into the speaker. No, she said, but I know what's coming. I know the look of this storm. I held my breath. You knew this would happen? There was a pause. You don't understand, Hana. This isn't just about Sukjin. This is about your father, about what he built, about what he destroyed. I'm not following. I need to see you in person. Why? I snapped. You couldn't look me in the eye at the funeral. Why now? Because, she said, voice steadying, you're about to dig up things that should have stayed buried. And if you do it without knowing the full story, they'll kill you before you even understand who's holding the knife. That stopped me cold. I agreed to meet her. We chose a quiet temple cafe in Samcheongdong, tucked away in the hills where city noise couldn't follow. I arrived early, wearing a baseball cap and coat too large for me, hoping to blend in. She arrived 10 minutes later, hair tied back, sunglasses on, posture brittle like porcelain ready to shatter. She looked smaller, not physically, but in presence. Once a woman who ruled dinner tables with one look, she now hesitated before sitting down across from me, like she feared even my judgment. She ordered hot citron tea, even though it was 27 degrees outside. I don't have long, she said. I'm being watched. By who? I asked. By them, she said flatly, by the same people you're now exposing. Be specific, I pushed. She stirred the tea slowly. Do you remember the night of your father's stroke? Of course I do. Do you remember where he was coming from? I paused, a dinner with Sokjin. She looked up. No, that's what Sokjin told you. He was coming back from Jeju, a meeting with investors, people he owed. Owed, I blinked, for what? To build Park & Sons. She placed a file on the table, a thin yellowed folder, the corners curled from age and neglect. I opened it and found financial records, ledgers from the mid-90s, signed contracts, and names I recognized from my recent investigation. Offshore banks, silent partners, holding firms with connections to government portfolios. All traced back to my father. He made a deal, she said, to go national, to expand fast, faster than he could afford. Sokjin warned him against it. But your father, he wanted to beat the clock, to leave his name carved into the stone before the world forgot it. So Sukjin's just finishing what he started, I muttered. She nodded slowly, but with a scalpel instead of a hammer. I felt like my lungs were folding in on themselves. And you never told me. Would it have changed anything? She whispered. Yes, I said sharply, it would have changed everything. We sat in silence. Even the birds in the temple courtyard had gone quiet. She reached into her coat and pulled out something small, an old USB stick. This was my backup. Of everything your father was hiding, I've been holding it for 17 years. I stared at it. Why now? Because you've already declared war, she said, eyes finally meeting mine. You should at least know whose blood you're spilling. I didn't take the USB immediately. I let it sit between us like a loaded gun. Do you still believe in him? I asked. Her face softened. I believe he tried, and that trying eventually became the lie. She stood. Be careful, Hana. There's more to Park & Sons than just Sokjin. You're not the only heir, and you're not the only one who wants the past buried. She walked away without looking back. I sat there for a long time, holding the flash drive in my palm like a relic. When I finally plugged it in that night, I found a single folder. Do not open, for her eyes only. Inside were documents I hadn't seen before. Voice memos, meeting recordings, internal letters. But one name kept repeating. Han Min-woo, my father. But not just in the context of Orchid. In the context of a deal. A pact. Signed in 1996. By 3 men. Han Min-woo, Kang Seok-jin, and someone else. A name I had not expected. Kim Yeon-se, Jisu's father. If this ever reaches Hana, it means I failed. Forgive me. My ears rang. The wound wasn't Sokjin. It never had been. The wound was the bloodline. I didn't sleep. I tried God, I tried. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that note. If this ever reaches Hana, it means I failed. Forgive me. My father's handwriting, shaky, rushed, but still undeniably his. Forgive him? For what? For dying? For being a man who built an empire from borrowed blood? For leaving me in a world where every name I trusted turned to ash the second I held a flame to it? My laptop was still open, the audio recordings softly ticking like countdowns. Jisu's father, my father Sukjin. Their voices looped through decades of decisions I was never meant to inherit. The first recording was dated October 17th, 1996. If the numbers don't shift before Q1, we're going under. That's not my concern. My men want security, not sentiment. Then we give them equity. We bury it inside subsidiaries. Clean on paper, irreversible in structure. And what happens if the girl finds out? She won't, not while I'm alive. My blood ran cold. They weren't just talking about strategy. They were talking about me, about silencing me before I even had a voice. By morning, I had made my decision. I needed to see Jisoo. But not at Orchid, not on a rooftop. Somewhere we weren't recorded, watched, hunted, somewhere quiet. We met in a closed comic book cafe near Sinchon, walls lined with shelves and dust, the hum of an old fridge in the back disguising every whisper. He walked in wearing a hoodie, hat low, but he didn't speak. Not until I slid the USB across the table. He didn't touch it. You found it, he said quietly. You knew, I replied. He exhaled like someone who'd been holding something in for years. My father used to say your dad was the best liar he ever met, Jisoo said. He admired him for it. Said Minwoo could hide a war behind a signature. And what about Sokjin? Jisoo's eyes hardened. He was the cleanup crew, the knife. We sat in silence. There was no room left for trust, only necessity. I'm not here to accuse you, I said, voice raw. But if your father was part of this pact, then you've been raised under the same silence I was. You think I don't know that? He snapped. You think it doesn't eat me every day? My father died under suspicious circumstances 5 years ago. His car went off a bridge during a clear night. No alcohol, no speed, and no camera caught it. You think it was Sokjin? I think it was whoever didn't want him changing his mind. That made my skin prickle. What did he try to do? He tried to give me everything. Jisoo's voice cracked for the first time. A copy of the pact? Names, codes. He even told me to protect you if it came to it. I blinked. He knew I'd come back. He hoped you would. And now we were here, children of a poisoned dynasty, holding secrets like lit matches in a forest soaked with gasoline. I need you to do something, I said slowly. Name it. There's one name in these files, one person we haven't traced yet, the third signature on the original pact. I pulled up the note again. Park Jitae. Jisoo. I continued. It's the only name I don't recognize, the only one that's been scrubbed from every Orchid file, every database. That's because he doesn't exist, Jisoo said. What? Park Jitae isn't a person, it's a code name. It was used internally to mask asset movement. When money needed to move quietly, or when authority needed to be invoked without legal exposure, it came from Park Jitae. My heart dropped. So it could be anyone? He hesitated. Or it could be everyone. The room felt colder. Then we have no endgame, I whispered. No face to blame, no head to cut off. Maybe that's the point, he said. You're not supposed to win against something that doesn't bleed. I stood shaking. Then we make it bleed. How? We use the one thing it hates, attention. His eyes lit up just slightly. You're thinking press? I'm thinking panic, I corrected. Leverage the pact, leak parts of it, redacted through anonymous sources. Make the board think someone inside is talking. Pit them against each other. Create fractures. And while they're distracted, Jisoo asked, we find the real Park Jitae. He nodded slowly. It'll take time. We don't have time. He reached for the USB. Then let's move fast. I almost smiled, but as he walked out the door, my phone buzzed. A single message, no sender, no timestamp, just 4 words. You missed one name. The message hit like a whisper through a sniper scope, silent, precise, and undeniably fatal. You missed one name? No number, no metadata, no trace. Just 4 words that made every thread of my plan feel like it had been dangling in plain sight. I stared at the screen, pulse spiking, as if whoever sent it could see my reaction, as if this was part of a conversation they had already started, and I was only now catching up. I called Jisoo immediately. It started, I said. The leak, he asked. No, the counter. He didn't speak for a beat. You got hit? A message, I said, just 4 words. He didn't ask what they were. He already knew. We're not alone in this, he said. Someone's watching the moves behind our moves. I took a deep breath. I think it's time we dig up Park Ji-tae. I thought we agreed. He's not a person. No, we assumed he wasn't. We met an hour later in a private vault below an abandoned bank building. Jisoo's idea, of course. The walls were lined with old cash boxes and decommissioned security panels. Inside, we laid out every fragment of data from the pact, every signature, every unregistered email, every odd timestamp and masked transaction. We've been treating Park Ji-tae as an alias, I said, pacing, a blind spot, a ghost. Jisoo nodded, because that's what the system shows. He's only listed as a proxy. He frowned. What are you saying? I opened my laptop and pulled up the encrypted bank record from my mother's USB. 3 deposits, each made in 1996. But what made my stomach twist wasn't the amounts. It was the pattern. Every account was activated through a parent entity. J1 Cultural Foundation. Jisoo's brows pulled together. Wait, that's a charitable trust founded by Seokjin's wife. On paper, it supports rural education and music therapy. He blinked, and in reality, I clicked into the structure. It's a money laundering sieve, but here's the part we missed. I zoomed in. One name was buried in the transaction approvals. A single verified signatory on all 3 accounts. Park Ji-tae, date of birth, passport number, residential address, all clean, all recent. All real. He exists, I whispered. Where? I looked at the address again. Mapo District, a penthouse at Yeonhui Hill. That's less than 20 minutes from Orchid HQ, Jisoo said. He's here. We stared at each other. And then the paranoia set in. If he's real, Jisoo said slowly, and he knows we're onto him, he could be planning his own strike. Or worse, he could have already started. We didn't have the luxury of subtlety anymore. We grabbed burner gear and drove to the address under heavy rain. The road slick with the kind of downpour that seemed timed for scenes like this. My fingers tapped nervously on my lap as Jisoo drove. I checked the gun tucked in my bag more times than I should have. We reached the building, a sleek tower hidden behind trees and silence. A doorman looked up, barely acknowledging us. Jisoo flashed a fake badge. Security didn't even blink. The elevator ride felt like an execution countdown. When the doors opened, the hallway was pristine, marble floors, minimalist design, not a speck of dust. We walked quietly to Unit 17B. Jisoo raised his hand to knock. The door opened before he touched it. And standing there, calm as if he'd been waiting for us, was a man in his mid-50s. Sharp suit, calm expression, a face so unremarkable it became suspicious in itself. You're late, he said. My skin crawled. You're Park Ji-tae, I asked. In this life, yes. That's when I knew this man had worn many names. He gestured us inside. The penthouse was stark, empty of warmth, walls lined with filing cabinets and clocks set to different time zones. A single photo sat on the mantel, my father Seokjin and a third man blurred by age. Park Ji-tae. He poured tea like this was just another Tuesday. I assume you found the pact, he said calmly. You knew it would resurface? Jisoo asked. I engineered it, he replied. Minwoo was brilliant, but he lacked contingency. You, however, Miss Park, do not. He turned to me, gaze sharp. I've watched you for years. You're behind Seokjin? I asked. He chuckled. No, Seokjin is just a door. I am the key. I didn't know whether to run or scream. What do you want from me? I asked. You've already given it, he said. You've disrupted the structure, shaken the throne. It's exactly what we needed. We. He smiled again, and this time it chilled me to the bone. The heirs always think they're the rebels, but they're just tools, sharpened by grief, guided by ghosts. Then what happens now? I asked. He leaned in. Now you finish what your father started. What? He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a legal document, granting me full executive control of a dormant orchid division. Effective immediately. Why would you do this? I whispered. Because chaos must have a queen. He stood, and just before walking into the shadows of the hallway, he said. The door closed behind him, leaving us in silence. I didn't touch the document for almost an hour. The envelope sat on the table like a loaded weapon, silent but promising ruin the moment I picked it up again. Executive control of a dormant division within Orchid, granted by Park Ji-tae, the ghost with a heartbeat. Jisoo stood by the window, arms folded, eyes burning a hole through the skyline. The rain hadn't stopped. Lightning flashed over the Han River, casting the city in flashes of cold silver. He wants to make you his piece, he finally said, a bishop, or worse, a queen. I didn't answer, because the terrifying truth was, he already had. All this time, I had believed I was clawing back control, writing my own playbook, striking first, cutting deep. But Park Ji-tae had anticipated every move. No, he had designed the board. And now he had crowned me the queen on it. What do we do? Jisoo asked. We? I said bitterly. You saw the letter. There is no we in this. He turned toward me, eyes flashing. Don't do that. What? Don't pretend like this isn't happening to both of us. Don't push me out because it's easier to carry the blame alone. I bit my lip hard. I didn't know how to respond because he was right, and that scared me more than any pact or puppet master behind it. Finally, I broke the silence. Do you think my father knew? Jisoo looked away. If he didn't, he should have, but part of me thinks he did, and he let it happen anyway. That hollowed me. Was my father ambitious? Yes. Was he desperate? Clearly. But complicit. I opened the file. Inside was a secondary document, an activation clause. It showed that the dormant division wasn't just a branch. It was the financial core of a larger network, a network spanning 13 countries, all linked by anonymous shell companies. But more horrifying was the name on the clause. Legacy Control Transfer Subject Park Hana. It was created in 2004. I was 11. I nearly dropped the paper. They planned this, I whispered. They groomed me. Jisoo read over my shoulder. The division was built around you. You were never meant to be erased. You were meant to come back when the board was cleared. The crown was never abandoned. It was hidden until the blood was dry. I stood up, pacing the room. So that's what all this was? The erasure, the exile, the silence, just part of the metamorphosis? Jisoo nodded grimly. They didn't want Hana Park the girl. They wanted Hana Park the ghost, the myth. I grabbed the flash drive again, heart pounding. They made me a weapon, but I get to choose where I strike. He stared. You're going to take the seat? I didn't answer immediately. But inside I already knew the answer. Yes. Because if I didn't, someone else would. Because if I didn't, the blood wouldn't stop. Because sometimes, to kill the beast, you have to climb into its mouth and tear it apart from the inside. The next morning, I walked into Orchid headquarters through the back entrance. No disguise, no cap, no hesitation. Security didn't stop me. My ID card, dormant for years, scanned green. I took the elevator up to the 47th floor, where the dust-covered division had been mothballed for a decade. When the doors opened, I saw two men already inside. They stood the moment they saw me. Both bowed. Director Park, they said in unison. The air inside was cold, unused, but the computers were already on, the lights were humming, everything had been waiting. Like a heart that had stopped, now beating again. I walked to the main desk, placed the letter on the table, and said, "Let's begin." That evening, Jisoo and I sat on the rooftop again. The city buzzed below, but up here, we were in a different realm. "Do you feel powerful yet?" he asked. I didn't respond, because power wasn't the point anymore. It was ownership. Ownership of the past, of the truth, of the blood soaked into the concrete foundation of the Park family name. "I want them to pay," I said finally. So do I. Yes, I want their names uncarved, forgotten." I looked at him. "After what?" "After you win." I smiled faintly. No one wins in this story. The boardroom was colder than I remembered. Maybe it was the air conditioning. Maybe it was the ghosts. 12 chairs surrounded the long glass table. 12 names, 12 stories. Some of them veterans from my father's era. Some were Sokjin's hand-picked loyalists, and two of them were already gone. One vanished. One resigned without a word after the first leak. Now they were all here, waiting for me. I stepped into the room with silence stitched into my footsteps. My suit was black, not for mourning, but for clarity, for finality. Jisoo walked behind me, not as my shadow, but as a reminder that I didn't come alone. I sat at the head of the table. They watched me, some with fear, some with skepticism, some with the kind of smug curiosity only rich men wore when they believed themselves untouchable. Sokjin's seat was empty. Deliberately. Good. The legal director stood to read the statement. Per Clause 11 of the original Legacy Charter, dated 1996, and with full executive authority transferred via Dormant Division Activation and Board Code 4.9.3, we hereby recognize Park Hana as interim chairwoman of Orchid Holdings. No one clapped, no one smiled. Good, because this wasn't a coronation. This was a reckoning. "I'm not here for validation," I said, voice even. "I'm not here to pretend that I didn't burn the fuse that led to this meeting. I did. And if any of you are wondering what comes next, let me be clear." I opened the briefcase beside me. 12 folders, one for each board member. Inside evidence, bribes, affairs, offshore accounts, secret donations, whistleblower suppression, the kind of documents that end careers or lives. Gasps filled the room. "You're all compromised," I said, "every single one of you. You ran this company like a cartel with air conditioning. You buried the truth because it was cheaper than facing it." One man stood. "You can't threaten us like—" "I'm not threatening you," I interrupted. "I'm offering you a choice." I slid a final document onto the table. "Step down, quietly, painlessly. Your names will be omitted from the final report. You'll vanish with your retirement funds and some dignity intact. Or—" I looked up. "You can stay and burn." One by one, they looked at the documents, and one by one, they broke. The first to stand was the oldest. He didn't speak, he just nodded and left. The rest followed, even the smug ones. It was over in 11 minutes. When the last door closed, I looked at Jisoo. "It's done," I said. "No," he corrected, "this part is done." 3 weeks later, Orchid announced the largest corporate restructuring in its history. The media called it a rebranding, but those who watched closely knew better. The family was gone. The bloodline dissolved. Every project linked to the original pact was terminated. And yet, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like digging your hands into wet cement and realizing you were the one sinking. My mother left Korea 2 days after the last board member resigned. She sent me a letter from Norway. It said only this: "Legacy doesn't ask for your consent, but redemption does." I never wrote back. Cha Eun-mi disappeared again, back into the shadows. but not before handing me one final file. It contained every name linked to Park Ji-tae, even the ones I hadn't dared trace. Some of them were still in power. Some were watching me, waiting to see what I would do next. I now live in the penthouse above Orchid HQ, the same floor Seokjin once occupied. It's quiet, sterile, safe, but some nights I walk barefoot to the edge of the rooftop. And I think about my father. How much of him was monster? How much was man? And whether I've become both. Jisoo visits sometimes. We talk, drink wine, laugh, cautiously. There's something between us, but neither of us name it. We both carry ghosts too heavy for love. One evening he asked me, "Do you regret it?" I didn't answer right away. Because revenge is never clean. It tastes like blood, like memory, like a name carved into stone before it's earned. But I looked at him and I said, no, because if I hadn't taken the fire, someone else would have burned it all down worse. The world remembers Orchid as a phoenix story now. But those who were inside the fire, they know better. This wasn't rebirth. This was reclamation. This was the story of a daughter who was never meant to return, but did. And when she came back, she didn't knock. She broke the door, sat at the head, and turned the throne into ash.